Good afternoon. I'm Alderman Michael Murphy, and today is Wednesday, May 26th. It's 4 p.m., and I am chairman of the Finance and Personnel Committee. Joining me this afternoon is Alderman Nick Kovac, Alderman Samaripa, Alderwoman Mullally Cox, and the Vice Chair, Alderman Scott Spiker. In addition, Alderman Mark Barkowski is present for the meeting this afternoon. Today is an important day because this is an opportunity for the public to have their voices heard. Previously, there has been already a meeting held on the north side, which residents had an opportunity to express how they feel and believe the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, can be allocated and spent in terms of helping out our city. This is a unique opportunity. In my years of public service, this has never ever occurred, but we are fortunate due to the actions of President Biden and Congress that supported allowing for these dollars to be allocated both to states and local governments to meet the needs of our community in response to the terrible COVID virus that affected so many of us and so many of our citizens. So this is an opportunity for the public to have their voices heard. So we'll be allowing citizens 2 minutes. We have nearly 70 participants today to express their viewpoints. There will be other opportunities to express your viewpoints, though. There will be a survey that will be conducted, and that survey will be made available through the mayor's office, department administration, and all women's offices as soon as Friday. In addition, you certainly are more than willing and welcome to submit other written documents if you wish to your local representatives or certainly to the mayor's office. The afternoon will be very short presentation from the head of the budget office, Dennis Zaccarino, followed up by a presentation from Sharon Robertson, the director and Department of Administration, along with Nikki Purvis, who will be talking about the process issues with a special focus on racial equity inclusion. And then we'll be opening it up for the 2-minute presentation. But before we begin, I do think it's important that we take one moment of silence for a very tragic incident today that unfolded in San Jose. Our fellow city employees were tragically lost. It appears at least 9 individuals lost their lives, along with many others who were injured. So I think it is appropriate before we begin this officially meeting that we take a moment of silence for all those victims and their families who are experiencing this tragic day and unfortunately another mass shooting in our country. Thank you. So we'll begin with one item on the agenda, item 3, file number 210135, communication relating to public comments on the allocation and distribution of ARPA funds. And we'll begin with a short presentation, as I indicated, from Dennis Zaccarino, director of our budget office. Dennis?
Okay, just waiting to be able to put my PowerPoint up.
Should be good.
Hope you can all see that.
There you go.
All right, we'll go through the guidelines as quick as possible, but there is a lot of information in here. I'll just touch on some of the highlights and not read the entire thing. But the uses of funds are to support public health expenditures directly on the virus. Then there's also area to address negative impacts caused by the public health emergency as well. And I'll get into a little more detail on that as we move along. And then replace lost public sector revenue, provide premium pay for essential workers, and invest in water, sewer, and broadband. For the investment in healthcare, just related directly to the COVID virus. You can see a number of them you might be familiar with: vaccinations, testing, PPE, and so forth, that are directly related to COVID. And here's a continuation of some of that, where you can actually deal with facilities and make facilities safe, as well as other related things, including ventilation. Then the Act goes on to talk about other things, mainly mental health, substance abuse treatment, and other behavioral things, hotlines, crisis lines. It's clear that the funding can be used for mental health and substance abuse. We can also use the funds for those items that have been affected by the public health crisis, and also for disparities that have shown as well. So we can deliver assistance to workers and families, aid to unemployed, food, housing, and other things as well. We can support small businesses. The focus of this bill is also on speeding the recovery in tourism, travel, and hospitality sectors, as well as rebuilding the public sector capacity, meaning bringing back and rehiring people that might have been laid off or let go. As I mentioned a short bit of time ago, the funds are also used to address health disparities and social determinants of health, including community health workers, public benefit investors, and the big piece, or the big two pieces that stuck out with us with this section, are the remediation of lead hazards, meaning lead paint and lead water, and community violence intervention programs, our Office of Violence Prevention. There's also ability to spend this money on housing in a number of ways. We can spend it on homeless, creating affordable housing, vouchers, residential counseling, and housing navigation. Many ways to spend it there. It's also to address the educational disparities, and also promoting healthy childhood environments. This goes back to lead a little bit, but it also we'll discuss a little bit more regarding, in that case, would be also child care. It does address. For the replacing lost public revenue, this gets a little complicated, but I'll keep it rather to the straightforward pieces. We're using it to avoid cuts to government services, and those will have a broad ability to spend the money. What's ineligible is debt service and placing money into a reserve account. And there's a process of calculation that we're in the middle of calculating that will provide us this dollar amount. This will cover a lot of things that are not covered by the remaining parts of the bill. What they mean by replacing revenue loss in this case is providing revenues to provide services that may not be provided, or we can look at certain projects or other programs that we can offer using that revenue loss. Premium pay for essential workers, I put a number of them here. Didn't mean anything by having farms stand out there. I think that was just a little bit of typo. But those are the types of jobs that can receive premium pay. It's an extra payment per hour that will help those individuals that are in the line of service, either directly impacting COVID, or those, as you can see, like food and grocery stores that help the community get through the COVID. Then the last piece is investing in water and sewers. I kept those separate from broadband, but those will help with just about anything sewer and water related, including water mains, sewer mains, sewer flooding mitigation projects, and water treatment plant. The broadband is available to provide service to those that are underserved or have no connection at this point, but it's also to be used in a way to make broadband affordable as well to the public. And that is the quick presentation I have on how we can utilize ARPA funds.
All right. Are you finished, Dennis?
Yes.
Okay, then Sharon, Ms. Robinson, and Nikki Purvis has a short presentation. Please go ahead. Oops, you need to unmute yourself, Sharon.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on the city's ARP allocation and accountability process. And I'm also very proud to be joined by Nikki Purvis. She's actually our city's first Chief Equity Officer. And for those of you in the listening audience who may not be familiar with the mayor's 2021 executive budget and the final adopted budget by the Common Council, we actually created a new Office of Equity and Inclusion that's led by Ms. Purvis. So Nikki will actually follow me, and she'll make comments about the steps that the city is taking to ensure a transparent and racially conscious and inclusive art process. But before I turn it over to her, I did want to say that even though the American Rescue Plan Act is, as the chairman said, an unprecedented opportunity, I just want to reinforce that this is not the Department of Administration's first time leading a major stimulus effort. In fact, we led that effort in coordination with the mayor, the Common Council, city departments, and other community members. And it was an effort that was the Obama administration's response to the subprime mortgage lending crisis in 2008. So in 2009, the city actually garnered or achieved or secured close to about $200 million in that effort. And I just want to reinforce that the Department of Administration is very serious and aggressive about making sure that all city dollars work for all residents. So when I brought up that effort, I just wanted to let this audience know that, like that stimulus bill, we will be working to ensure that these monies, the ARP monies, reach every corner of the city and all the people in Milwaukee. And I'll just give a few examples of how we do have a proven track record of making sure we truly do make investments wisely. Even in the 2009, during that stimulus recovery, we actually have so many projects that are still here today that are having a long-lasting impact. And projects that come to mind are Veterans Manor on North 35th and West Wisconsin Avenue. That's like a 52-unit building that we invested in through that last stimulus effort that really is serving veterans. And Olga Village, that's a pretty large apartment unit that's housed on the campus at the United Community Center. And as a result of that past stimulus effort, we fixed streets like Lisbon Avenue, bridges like the Juneau Bridge, Wisconsin Bridge. We also tripled summer jobs. And so again, the reason I wanted to make that point is just to demonstrate that we have a record in terms of spending these stimulus dollars very, very wisely and in a manner that will have like a long lasting impact. But what makes me more excited about the ARP is that it really is an unprecedented opportunity. And this is the first time that I've seen such a large infusion of funds, like a direct payment that is coming to cities like Milwaukee across this nation. Because when the last stimulus effort occurred in 2009, we didn't get a direct payment. We were aggressively competing for those dollars. So this makes our job a whole lot easier in terms of not having to submit grant proposals. We can just come up with our comprehensive plan that includes community engagement to make sure that they, again, touch every corner of the city, and especially residents most severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so another reason I'm excited is that when you combine the city's $394 million payment with the aid that's coming from the county and the state, as well as anticipated future jobs and transportation bills, it actually translates to about $1 billion or more that'll be coming into Milwaukee over the next few years. And so I just want to assure you all that it truly is an honor to be working to make sure these dollars are spent wisely. And it's an honor to work with our first Chief Equity Officer, again, to ensure the most transparent and racially conscious and inclusive process ever. So I'd like to turn it over to Nikki, who can talk about the steps she's taking to, again, make sure these dollars work for every resident in the city of Milwaukee.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for that introduction. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to be here today to share a little bit about our process. So the mayor and county council have committed to applying an equitable and inclusive process to determine the best way to allocate the American Rescue Plan funds. And so one of the things that we have implemented internally is utilizing a racial equity tool. And what that is essentially a set of questions that actively inserts racial equity into our decision-making process. And this is actually a best practice of the Government Alliance for Race and Equity, of which the city of Milwaukee is a member of. And so we have really committed to making sure that we make racial equity part of an explicit process. And so when we are explicit about that and bring it into the operations and decision making, we know that if we're not intentional about that, that racial inequities are likely to be perpetuated. And so these racial equity tools and the racial equity toolkit, which some also utilize the terms of racial equity lens, really provides a structure for institutionalizing or establishing in a practice the consideration of race and equity. And so part of that process for city departments was, again, to set equitable outcomes, really use data to drive some of those decisions, to look at the advancement of opportunities or minimizing harm, but to also make sure that we have a process in place to evaluate, communicate, and be accountable for our processes. So when we talk about equitable outcomes, we're looking at, what equitable results or outcomes does the plan or proposal, what types of results do we plan to see from that? And so when we talk about results, we're looking at the end conditions in the community that we aim to impact. And when we're talking about outcomes, we want to know how much did we do, how well did we do it, and will anyone be better off from those actions? When we're looking at analyzing data, we want to make sure, does the proposal that departments have submitted, do they address any existing racial inequities or disparities? Will there be any benefits that reach the most vulnerable, excluded, or impacted groups? As well as, are we prioritizing specific neighborhoods or geographic areas? When we are talking about advancing opportunities and minimizing harm, we want to know how will our proposals of these projects or programs, how will they advance the achievement of racial equity? Who will the proposal help the most? Who will it help the least? And who will it not help at all? And so if there isn't an opportunity to help anyone, how can we address those limitations? And again, part of the last piece of that component is to evaluate, communicate, and be accountable. And when we're asking about that, we want to know what measures will be used to assess and track progress. How will we use qualitative and quantitative data disaggregated by demographics to track outcomes for different populations? And so again, we are very clear that if we do not lead with race as part of that racial equity lens, our outcomes will not show that we were intentional with our actions. One of the other things that I wanted to share is we have committed to authentic public engagement. And so Mayor Barrett has directed the Department of Administration to develop a comprehensive plan to expand the American Rescue Plan funds in a manner that is responsive to the needs of city residents and the Milwaukee community. And so one of the ways that we will utilize public engagement is by the issuance of an RFP, which is actually available now. That RFP is due on Tuesday, June 1st, but it really is an opportunity for us to go beyond the survey that Mr. Chair mentioned early and really be able to access the most underserved and marginalized communities and not just solely relying on the survey to do that for us. Again, that RFP is due June 1st, and details are available on the Purchasing Division's website. Can also drop that link into the chat for those that are interested in responding. And then finally, just again, the public survey will be available by Friday. We will share that. We will have it translated into Spanish and Hmong, and it will close on Wednesday, June 30th. So we will have a month for folks to be able to provide their feedback. And so again, thank you for your time and the opportunity to share our efforts around racial equity and inclusion.
Thank you. I want to forward an opportunity to my colleagues on the committee if they would like to say a few words before we take public testimony. If not, we'll go right into hearing from the citizens. We're all good? Okay. All right. As I indicated, individuals will have an opportunity to voice their suggestions and their comments, and we're going to begin in the order of which people registered, and there's approximately 70 individuals who have signed in. So the first individual is Nicole Hudzinski, followed by Tim Nikolai and Obi Newbauser. So Nicole, you have its opportunity to go ahead and make your comments. Is Nicole present?
You just have to unmute yourself, Nicole.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
We can.
Alderman, okay. And then would it be okay if Tim and Obi and I go together? We all work for the American Heart Association. We're going to talk about 3 different initiatives very briefly.
That's fine.
Okay. So I'm going to start us off. Good afternoon, Chairman Murphy and members of the committee. My name is Nicole Hudzinski. I'm the Government Relations Director here in Wisconsin for the American Heart Association. And I'm joined with 2 of my Milwaukee area colleagues, Tim Nikolai and Obi Newbauser. We're here today to talk about 3 initiatives that we would love for you to consider funding with ARPA funds. Before I jump in, I do want to point out that we did send a letter to each of your offices late last week from our volunteer leaders in the Milwaukee area specific to these 3 initiatives. And also included in that email was a stakeholder memo from other organizations in the Milwaukee area that we're working with on the first initiative, which has to do with SNAP produce incentives. SNAP produce incentives are oftentimes referred to as double dollars or market match programs, and they exist all across the country. Program structures vary from state to state and from community to community, but in general in these programs, they provide additional funding to SNAP families to be able to purchase fruits and vegetables. The easiest example is at a farmer's market. If someone goes to a farmer's market and spends $20 in SNAP dollars at the market, then they're given an additional $20 to spend at the market on fruits and vegetables. It's also possible to implement these programs in a grocery setting. In Dane County, there is an existing program called the Dane County Double Dollars program. And in that program, the Willie Street Co-op is the double dollar provider during the winter months when the farmer's market is not as robust. Although they're only able to do it, Willie Street's only able to do it once a week on Tuesdays because of the resources they have available. We see these programs as really a triple win. Families are able to put more healthy food on the table, local farmers can benefit because of increased sales, and the local economy benefits because SNAP dollars are spent locally. Last year, there was a pilot program in Milwaukee doing exactly what we're talking about. It ran for 10 weeks, very late in the growing season, with only 5 farmers markets participating. Yet in that short time, it served 793 households from 37 different zip codes. Just think of what the impact could be with more resources. We're asking you to consider investing $5 million over the next 3 years in a SNAP produce incentive program in Milwaukee. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk about the next initiative.
Good evening and thank you. I am Tim Nicolai, Senior Community Impact Director for the American Heart Association in Wisconsin, and I'm pleased to talk about a second priority that we've identified in consultation with our volunteers and community partners, expanding the use of self-measured blood pressure, or SMBP. More than 120 million Americans have high blood pressure, increasing their risk for stroke, kidney disease, dementia, and more. Rates among Black Americans are even higher, often reaching levels nearing 60%. In Wisconsin, low-income individuals are almost 50% more likely to have hypertension. What's more, many don't even know that they have high blood pressure. It's frequently called the silent killer, as there are often no direct symptoms. Thus, there is a need for better access to and understanding of accurate blood pressure readings. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. SMBP is an effective way to help diagnose hypertension and lay a foundation for blood pressure control. SMBP is what you might expect, providing individuals with monitors to use outside of clinical settings and the knowledge they need to utilize them. Comprehensive SMBP programs like we support then provide opportunities for clinicians to review the collected data and inform subsequent care. SMBP is effective because it meets people where they are to record regular blood pressure readings. It also limits white coat hypertension, where many, and Blacks in particular, see blood pressure levels spike in clinical settings. Long before COVID, the CDC identified controlling hypertension as a leading opportunity to prevent premature death. The pandemic both underscored and exacerbated that reality. Hypertension emerged as a leading comorbidity of severe COVID, just as access to care was disrupted. For the past year then, clinics as well as community organizations have communicated to us a strong desire to expand SMBP in Milwaukee. 3 local community health centers recently received funding from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to do just that, and it's a great start. However, those dollars will be stretched by the needs of not just their patients, by the needs of their patients, not to mention the number of hypertensive patients who seek care elsewhere, if at all.
And so for that program, we are requesting a consideration of investing $1 million over the next 3 years to build upon those programs that Tim mentioned that are already taking place in Milwaukee. And Obi's going to talk about the third initiative, tobacco cessation.
Good evening, everybody. Obi Boozer, I'm the director for the Community Impact for the American Heart Association for Wisconsin. Smoking puts individuals at higher risk for becoming seriously ill from COVID-19. Smoking can weaken your immune system and put you at a higher risk of severe illness or death from COVID-19. Additionally, communities of color are a key target of the tobacco industry. Tobacco retailers in Milwaukee's African American and Latinx neighborhoods are more likely to sell cheaper tobacco products and more often display cigarettes at a child's eye level and near candy than in white neighborhoods. We must do more to help people quit and combat the influence of big tobacco in minority communities. There are many on-the-ground groups who are working with the community around these efforts. Many of you on the committee have also been champions on various activities and initiatives to reduce the burden of tobacco in our community. I have personally worked with the Wisconsin African American Tobacco Prevention Network. Works have included No Menthol Sunday, in which Mayor Baird has provided a proclamation the last 3 years, as well as a No Singles and No Loosies campaign that was designed to recognize and support retailers who don't sell to minors and don't sell singles and or loosies, which is predatory and a pathway to tobacco addiction. Looking forward, there are a number of initiatives we could implement if resources were available. One example is the Freedom from Smoking program, some of you may remember. This program was available prior to COVID-19 and offered cessation curriculum to residents in public housing. There was a long waiting list for these on-site smoking cessation services. Funding could allow this program to be resumed. Additionally, Milwaukee could benefit from more boots on the ground, trained community residents engaging in education and outreach to promote smoking cessation versus the tendency for marginalized populations to try to go cold turkey. That's an approach that often leads to relapse. Additional funding would allow for more workshops, outreach, and support to our faith partners that are educating their congregants and the community on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our next participant, I did want to afford an opportunity. The President of the Common Council is present. If you have a few words. President Cavalier Johnson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Alderman Burkowski, who's here as well, and members of the community. I just wanted to come here this afternoon to once again thank the members of the Common Council, the members who hosted a very similar public meeting last week, members of the Finance Personnel Committee who are hosting a meeting today, and members of the Common Council who will be hosting a similar listening session for members of our community on the near south side to learn the priorities of residents of the city of Milwaukee and expending the nearly $400 million in federal American Rescue Plan Act funds that we'll be receiving to help improve the city of Milwaukee over the course of the next 3 years plus. Your participation in this process is critical. It's important. We want to hear from you. And I'm glad that organizations and individuals are taking the time out of their busy schedules last week, this week as well, in order to let their voices be heard. So just a thank you to you, Mr. Chairman, to this committee, to members of the Common Council, and most importantly to the community for being a part of the process. So thank you.
Thank you, President Johnson. Our next participant is Charlene Moore, Ms. Moore, and then followed by Eric Pearson.
Don't see her.
Oh, Ms. Moore, okay. If she's not present, okay. Then we'll move on to Eric Pearson and then Ashley Norks. Eric Pearson.
Eric, you'll have to unmute yourself. You're muted, Eric. You just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, we'll move on to, I'm sorry for these technical difficulties, and hopefully in the near future, we will have back to open meetings. Ashley Norris, N-O-R-I-S. Is Ashley present?
Yes, I am. I do not have any proposals or suggestions at this time. I'm here just to listen. Thank you.
Okay. Caressa Givens is the next individual. Caressa Givens, followed by Ben Turk.
Hello, this is Caressa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Caressa Givens. I serve with the Wisconsin Bike Federation as a program manager for Milwaukee Safe and Healthy Streets, as well as the pedestrian advocacy contract, Milwaukee Walks. So I am speaking on behalf of Milwaukee Safe and Healthy Streets, our partners, and also the Wisconsin Bike Federation. Today, I'm here to talk about spending the American Recovery Act plan funding and how it comes down to an informed resident base for real decision-making power, a guide that we've created that will be coming out shortly after this call today around safer built environment for the city of Milwaukee. So first of all, before I get into some of the details, I just want to say that Milwaukee Safe and Healthy Streets, along with the local Bike Fed chapter, believes it is vital that the decisions about spending the ARP funding are transparent and inclusive with a substantial community involvement in the decision-making process. Robust community-led decision-making process requires diverse ideas to be evaluated, taken apart, and rebuilt by the community. We respectfully put forward the ideas that I will be sharing in a moment, not only to the office of the mayor, alderpersons, and other city leadership, but more importantly, we are sharing this information with residents so that they can make up their minds about what is important to them as educators. As the community pursues a better quality of life for safer, healthier streets, reducing reckless driving, we must all have an opportunity to learn about the creative solutions that can be made to increase health and public safety in the built environment, keeping in mind the culture and practices of restorative justice. So we will be, like I said, we will be publishing this information in more detail on wisconsinbikefed.org. So I'll just go through these really quickly. We're calling for the purchase of the 30th Street corridor between the Hank Aaron State Trail and Havenwood State Park, creating a community outreach and engagement team of at least 3 staff housed within the Department of Public Works, lowering speeds and narrowing roadways, adding curb extensions at all intersections where they are possible, starting with high injury network from the pedestrian plan, and expanding the bubbler bike system. Lastly, on May 24th, the executive director of the National Association of City Transportation Officials released a statement warning advocates and local agencies across the country that the proposed transportation bill from the Biden administration maintains what makes American transportation inequitable, unsustainable, and unsafe. By continuing to funnel most federal transportation dollars through state DOT with no required input from cities, publicly funded projects will have no obligation to. Excuse me, may I reserve more time, I believe?
Ms. Givens, thank you. Our next participant is Ben Turk and then Kevin Driscoll.
Hello, this is Ben Turk. Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Ben Turk. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I am testifying that the funds from the Recovery Act should go toward the most needy in the community. And I'm concerned that it sounds like the Milwaukee Police Department is going to try to access some of those funds. Over this last year, the pandemic threatened many people in Milwaukee, and the police also threatened people in Milwaukee. They went to war against our community. And the idea that Recovery Act funds would go to the police in any kind of way is insulting and offensive. And it shows which side of that war you all are on. I was out in solidarity with the people. I got shot with tear gas. I got shot with rubber bullets. I have a friend with asthma who could not breathe well for days after getting tear gassed by the Milwaukee Police Department. And so, well, we're all concerned about like our lungs and breathing and COVID and the pandemic. The police are exacerbating that problem with tear gas. I also remember one of the vivid memories from those days was a young man on top of a car shouting, "I can't breathe, can you breathe?" And he wasn't talking about the tear gas. There wasn't tear gas at that moment. He was talking about kind of emotional distress that the police put people in routinely every single day going forward, regardless of whether there's a pandemic going on. And the idea that recovery money that is supposed to help us recover from the harm that we experienced this last year will go to the people who are putting us in that kind of distress. We cannot allow that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person is Kevin Driscoll, Mr. Driscoll, and then Deborah Gillespie. Mr. Driscoll, is Mr. Driscoll present?
You'll have to unmute yourself, Kevin.
Individual is present, but okay. We're going to move on to Deborah Gillespie and then Meg Kilkenny. Ms. Gillespie?
I don't see her on.
She's not present. Ms. Gillespie, if you're present, please unmute yourself and you're up. Okay, we'll go down to Meg Kilkenny.
Hello, can you all hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Meg. I live in the 3rd District and I'm a member of the Milwaukee Farmers Market Coalition. Our coalition piloted a program in the fall of 2020 called the Milwaukee Market Match. We had the alliteration going for us. It doubled the dollars of folks using their Quest card at 5 participating farmers markets in Milwaukee County to have access to free fruits and vegetables. In just 10 weeks of the season, we distributed $19,653 in Milwaukee Market Match coupons to almost 800 unique households from a total of 37 different zip codes. 70% of total participation came from the following zip codes: 53204, 206, 208, 212, 215, 216, and 53221. The pilot was implemented by Fondy Milwaukee, who operate the Fondy Farmers Market. And because it was such a successful program, the systems and structures are already in place for another round of Milwaukee Market Match. So investing $5 million over the next 3 years in SNAP incentives with American Rescue Plan Act funds would be investing in a shovel-ready program that combats food insecurity. Last year's 10-week pilot was funded by the Greater Milwaukee Foundation COVID Response Grant. I was able to see firsthand the impact this program had because my neighborhood market, the River West Gardeners Market, was a participant. Folks using SNAP were eager to stretch their dollars further and support their local farmers while also being able to increase the amount of produce going on their families' tables at no additional cost to them during such a difficult time of this continued pandemic. That is all. Thank you to the committee for your time.
Thank you. Our next 2 participants are Paul Mazzina and then Danitra Jones.
Paul Mosina is not here.
Is Paul Mazzina present?
No.
Okay. Then Danitra Jones and Raymond Monk. Ms. Jones?
He's not here either.
She's not present. Okay. Raymond Monk and then Mark Pelzak. Raymond Monk.
He's not here.
Not present. Okay. Mark Pelzak and Jeremy Herbisol.
Mark Pelzak's here.
Is Mark Pelzak present? All right, great.
Good evening, Chair Murphy and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Mark Pelzak. I am Vice President of AFSCME, Council 32 in Wisconsin. I've been an employee of the City of Milwaukee for 19 years. The American Rescue Plan Act will bring significant funds into our city. This committee, the Common Council, and the mayor have an opportunity to invest that money into general city employees and the services they provide. Specifically, I want to talk about COVID-19 hazard pay. In May of 2020, COVID-19 hazard pay was established for many essential frontline general city employees. Shortly after it was established, guidance from the U.S. Treasury Department indicated strict guidelines for paying for hazard pay with the CARES grant funds. The council then ended this pay for most general city employees, leaving only some health department and police and fire employees as eligible for this pay. The COVID-19 hazard still exists, but because the pay could not be funded with grant funds, it was eliminated. The ARPA funds specifically allow premium pay for essential workers and allows pay to be retroactive for those that have worked through the pandemic. I urge you to fund premium pay for general city employees that have continued to do the work of our city through the pandemic and to fund that pay retroactively to when the COVID-19 hazard pay was initially established in May 2020. I also ask that you resist the urge to spend more money on the police budget, which is already funded at about $300 million annually, and instead ask you to make investments into public works, neighborhood services, libraries, health, city development, and services for our community, and to invest in the general city employees that provide those services. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual is Jeremy Herbisol and then Melody McCurtis.
Hi there, this is Jeremy. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Jeremy Ebersol. I'm with the Milwaukee Preservation Alliance. The city's ARPA funds represent an historic opportunity for Milwaukee to invest in affordable housing in underserved neighborhoods and protect our environment by investing in the restoration rather than the demolition of the hundreds of city-owned homes currently on the raise and foreclosure list. Vacancy does not equal blight, and using ARPA funds to restore these homes would be a strong investment in underserved neighborhoods that would create rather than eliminate desperately needed affordable housing, returning properties to productive use and the tax rolls rather than reducing them to empty lots, and support more skilled labor than mechanical demolition. The historically high cost of lumber makes creating affordable housing through new construction even more impossible than usual. Existing homes, however, are often built of irreplaceable old growth lumber. As the city considers its developing citywide affordable housing plan, these funds can help. By using them to restore existing affordable homes, the city can take advantage of the naturally occurring affordable housing that older homes represent, making neighborhoods safer while bringing vacant homes back to life. Investing in the restoration of vacant properties is also the environmentally friendly choice. Renovating an older home versus tearing down the same structure and replacing it with a new building has the equivalent effect of removing 93 cars from the road for an entire year. The winners of this year's highest international architecture award have said, quote, demolishing is a decision of easiness and short term. It is a waste of many things, a waste of energy, a waste of material, and a waste of history. Moreover, it has a very negative social impact.
30 seconds.
I urge the city to use our ARPA funds to move away from a question of why should this be saved to one of why would we throw this away. This is a once in a generation funding and gives us the opportunity to change the narrative, to not throw away affordable housing, but restore it, invest in neighborhoods in need, and protect the environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Melody McCurtis and then Ted Craig.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Melody McCurtis. I'm a resident in the 15th district. I also work in the 15th district. On May 14, 2021, me and about 100 or more organizations and community members sent a joint letter to all of the Common Council members and the mayor, basically saying that our community needs real investment. And that investment looks like none of these funds be spent until there is a clear community-led process put in place. That process looks like a participatory budgeting process with the trust of $100 million for each round of the ARP dollars. And this money should be distributed amongst all districts with more funding and priority to marginalized, directly impacted districts. This will allow residents from each automatic district to have decision-making power on how this large influx of money should be spent. Through this participatory budgeting process, residents, along with their district aldermen, will propose how funds should be invested within their communities, and residents would vote. This would ensure communities have real decision-making power on what their neighborhoods need and what they need to look like. There are over 650 examples all over the nation about how effective participatory budgeting is. When we think about equity and we think about all of the different things that our city has endured and how different neighborhoods endured different things based on the inequity that our city continues to perpetuate. We also ask that zero of these dollars go to the Milwaukee Police Department. We also ask that you guys provide funding for housing assistance, which includes rent, mortgage, utilities, deferment of cancellation, long-term eviction moratoriums, and money to invest in community-led development, housing initiatives, and community land trusts. We want direct funds to support youth-led organizations that support our youth with access to mentorship, jobs, internships, positive youth development programs, and more direct funding to support artists and art groups and recreation spaces in community. We want funds to support preventative health care, health services, well-being, specifically on the north and south side, and money to support mutual aid groups who have picked up the slack of the city and made sure that we kept our neighbors safe during this time. As individuals, organizations, and businesses that came together, we are asking for the decision to be made around participatory budgeting, and we want to see it in action. We don't want a survey. We want real action and real investment into our community. We will resend this.
If you can wrap it up, go ahead.
We'll resend this letter again, and we do want a response. The letter was sent over 2 weeks ago. Again, 100 or if not more organizations, community members from the north and the south side, the neighborhoods that have been impacted the most, has sent this letter, and we have still yet to get a response. I know in the last meeting with the aldermen of the north side, I know Malele Coggs referred to participatory budgeting as a survey, and it's not just a survey. It's giving power to the people that know what they need. It's a process to do that, and we have this money, this once in a lifetime money that
Thank you, Ms. McCurtis. And then we'll be happy to take any further written comments too, along with the letter that was submitted 2 weeks ago. Our next participant is Ted Craig and Chris Sandor.
Hi, I'm Ted Craig, and I'm speaking as a citizen. I'm a constituent of Alderman Murphy, living on 69th Street in Milwaukee, and I happen to serve on the City-County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity, which is ably chaired by Alderman Novak and County Supervisor Marcelia Nicholson. It's been said a few times that this money from ARP is a generational opportunity. And I would propose that at least some portion of this money goes towards a generational challenge that we face. Specifically in August 2019, the city made a very bold commitment, voting unanimously in the Common Council to commit to the goal of 45% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and to use those funds to create economic opportunity and to correct the terrible racial inequality that still exists in our metro area. These are really the two great injustices in our society, arguably the way that we've made very little progress on racial equity economically for many, many decades, and the fact that with climate change, we're leaving a world for our kids that is almost intolerable and just unconscionable. The task force is working very hard to come up with plans that will actually address both these issues, which fit very nicely together. But we all know it's going to be extremely difficult to find the resources that we need to really move the needle on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to move the needle on creating serious economic opportunity for people who are historically discriminated against and continue to be discriminated against in our society. The ARP funds, if you look at what it's for, dovetails very nicely with the climate goals and the equity goals that we're working on in the City County Task Force. And what will come to your attention is that the task force is going to be making some recommendations for how ARP money could be used to advance the goals we're pursuing, to do things like make housing much more affordable for people while cutting greenhouse gas emissions and achieving health outcomes at the same time, and similar recommendations in terms of transportation and so on. So there's a lot of great priorities that have been mentioned here today. Just hope that some significant portion of this money goes towards solving these twin problems of climate catastrophe that is impending and actually addressing the racial injustices that continue to exist in our society here.
Thank you. Next two individuals, Chris Sandor and Amy Turnham.
Chris is not here.
Chris Sandor is not present. Okay. Amy Turnham and then Darius Wright.
Amy is not here.
Amy is not present. Okay. Then Darius Wright and then Marvin Walker.
Darius is not here.
Darius is not present. Mr. Walker and then David Loken.
He is not here either.
Marvin Walker is not present.
Right. Correct.
Okay. And then David Loken and Armando Lopez.
Okay. David's here.
Okay, Mr. Loken.
You just need to unmute yourself, David Loken.
David Loken, you're up, and if you can unmute yourself, please. Okay. Armando Lopez or Pamela Ritger? So Armando present?
He is not here.
Armando Lopez is not present. Okay. Pamela Ritger and then Linnea Katz-Pettit.
I'm here. I'm here.
Who
Can
is
you hear
this?
me? This is Pamela Ritger.
Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Pamela Ritger. I'm the Milwaukee Program Director and a staff attorney with Clean Wisconsin. But I'm here speaking as a member of the Great Coalition, the Coalition on the Lead Emergency, speaking on the importance of using the ARPA funds to address the lead poisoning crisis that continues to plague our city. The COVID pandemic increased the lead poisoning risk for children of Milwaukee and magnified racial inequities with children confined to homes and having greater contact with lead paint and dust, soil, and other hazards, that just exacerbated their risk. The pandemic also greatly reduced the number of children being tested, down about 40% year over year because of the closure of clinics and WIC centers. The pandemic also blocked implementation of some of Cole's other initiatives in terms of the Birthing Moms pilot and reducing that actionable level for lead investigations down from 20 to 5. So the ARPA really presents an opportunity to continue the course towards a lead safe Milwaukee, and that course that has been impeded by COVID. We proposed a budget of about 55 million divided in the following ways, and we'll be following up with this to letters to all members of the Common Council. The first piece would be accelerating lead abatement by integrating it with weatherization and focusing those renovations in the areas with the highest levels of lead poisoning and the highest levels of high energy burden. About 1,000 units would cost $40 million.
30 seconds.
We also would like to need to fund more lead abatement contractors to do the work. We need to address deferrals that impede lead abatement and weatherization work to the tune of $5 million, a deferral fund to help with those. Increase community lead outreach workers and place them in specific clinics with the highest levels of lead poisoning. Increase lead testing and education, and fund water filters while lead service lines are being replaced. So we will follow up with a kind of a detailed proposal in terms of the dollars available. And other members of Cole should be speaking to some of these issues as well from even a more personal perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Linnea, and then Greg St. Arnold.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for letting me have this time to speak with you. As you mentioned, Alderman Murphy, we have a unique opportunity to not only restore Milwaukee the way it was before COVID, but we have an opportunity to make it even better. This opportunity can change the trajectory for individuals, families that have been ignored for far too long, especially those who have suffered racial and health inequities stemming from unsafe housing. According to the interim final rule, the Treasury encouraged recipients to consider funding that fosters strong, inclusive, equitable recovery, especially those uses with long-term benefits for health and economic outcomes. There are few methods to improving families' short and long-term health and economic outcomes better than providing safe housing. Study after study shows that nearly every aspect of one's life is improved when they live in safe, secure housing, and that's what we provide. My name is Linnea Cates-Pettit. I'm the CEO of Revitalize Milwaukee. Revitalize Milwaukee is proudly completed over 306 homes last year, affecting 536 Milwaukeeans in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. Homeowners are a pillar of our community, and we provide economic benefits to the city via taxes. They are also staples to so many of the vibrant neighborhoods that we call home. Throughout the last 21 years, we have actively provided quality free home repairs for our community to ensure long-term homeowners remain long-term homeowners. And even with the COVID pandemic last year, we never ever stopped delivering services.
30 seconds.
Right. The gap in services is big, and we're proud to fill the gap. We urge that the city sets aside $6 million, $2 million a year for us to use our expertise in understanding the needs of the community, so we work together to layer the services and help reach the goals of housing. Without these free home repairs, hundreds of low-income homeowners will slip through the cracks every year, and our community will be even worse, in a worse situation. We want to help, and we know that we can together make a huge impact. This is an opportunity for Revitalize Milwaukee and also the city to respond to the residents who need us the most. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg St. Arnold, and then Armin Tahir.
And I was planning to just listen into the meeting, didn't prepare anything to speak, but I'll just say one thing that I really appreciated Ms. Purvis's comments earlier about ensuring that there's a focus on equity and equity indicators in the use of the ARPA funds, and specifically an emphasis on collecting data disaggregated by race and really trying to understand what kind of outcomes are achieved with the use of these dollars. I think it's really important for building a long-term case for investment in many of the priority areas that we're looking at, specifically housing and early childhood education. So thank you for that, and I will end my comments here.
Thank you. Armin Tahir and then Peter Rickman.
Armin is not here.
Armin is not present. Okay. Peter Rickman and then Lorraine Lathan. Peter
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you. I am here on behalf of MASH, the Milwaukee Area Service and Hospitality Workers Union, SEIU Healthcare Wisconsin, SEIU Local 1, and the Wisconsin Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals. Collectively, we represent thousands of Milwaukeeans who are essential workers and employed in the hospitality, entertainment, and tourism industries. And we're here to focus on two things you received in a paper from us earlier this week. So we, in the spirit of ARPA, we want to build back better what was broken before COVID-19 in our labor markets. COVID-19 scrambled things, but it's not as if labor markets for what we now call essential workers or folks in the heat sectors, we're doing that great. So I know I have to keep my comments brief. So I'll say this, essential workers have always been essential and always will be. It's just that we discovered this term when it was hospital housekeepers and dietary aides, it was CNAs and nursing homes, it was building service workers who got us through the pandemic. Milwaukee works because we do. And pizza parties and yard signs aren't enough. We need to take care of raising the wages amongst folks who've served and sacrificed during this pandemic. We are confronting an impending workforce crisis when it comes to our hospitals, our nursing homes, our building service workers, because the pay is so low for work that is so important. This is something you can re-engineer in this otherwise broken labor market in the next 6 months. That's a tremendous possibility for ensuring this city continues to work for the folks whose work makes our city function for everybody else. And the second thing I want to touch on here is that
30 seconds.
We've all seen the hospitality, entertainment, and tourism sectors claimed as a workforce shortage problem. But the issue here is not only labor standards, which you're used to hearing from me about raising wages. It's a problem with workforce coordination. And folks are realizing they don't want to go back to the same low-wage jobs that are insecure, that don't provide a future, when they have found that that work isn't necessarily essential for their lives. So if we're going to address the hospitality, entertainment, and tourism industry functions in Milwaukee, we need to fix the way this labor market works. That means coordinating across employers and workers. The friction in the labor market means establishing common standards across all employers, and it means pooling the resources amongst employers. So this is no longer a sector of employment that pays low wages, does not provide benefits, and doesn't have secure employment. Your resources from ARPA funds can again re-engineer this labor market. We hope to work with you on building back better the labor markets in these key sectors and improving the lives of the thousands of Milwaukeeans we represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine Lathan and then Yima Davila Castro.
Lorraine is not here.
Lorraine is not present. Okay. Yima Davila Castro.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Yima.
Okay. Colin McGinn. Colin McGinn.
Is not here.
Not present. Okay. Daria Hall. Daria Hall.
And thanks, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Daria Hall, and I'm here on behalf of the Milwaukee Early Care and Education Civic Response Team, which is a coalition of child care providers, organizations that support child care educators and families, philanthropy, government, and nonprofits. We ask that the city invest Rescue Act funds in childcare, as is specifically referenced and allowed by the federal guidance we heard about earlier. Ensuring that families have access to quality, affordable childcare is a vital two-generation economic development and social mobility strategy. It allows parents of young children to participate in the workforce and is the best long-term investment we can make in children's academic, social, and developmental success. But even before COVID, far too many of Milwaukee's Black and Brown families didn't have access to quality, affordable childcare, and the pandemic has dramatically exacerbated this situation. Most childcare providers stayed open throughout the pandemic, but did so facing significantly decreased revenue and increased cost for health and safety, with up to 40% losing money by staying open to serve kids. Moreover, Milwaukee's childcare educators, almost all of whom are women and many of whom are Black and Brown women, were doing vital brain-building work throughout the pandemic while being paid an average of $10 an hour with no benefits, including no health insurance, during a pandemic. It's no wonder then that there's a 40% turnover rate in the ECE workforce.
30
Without
seconds.
investment, childcare providers will continue to struggle to stay in business and keep staff, and Milwaukee families, especially Black and Brown families, will continue to struggle to access quality, affordable care. So we ask the city to invest in childcare, specifically, 1, getting more Milwaukee residents into the early education pipeline, 2, providing professional development and support, 3, entering into contracts with childcare businesses that would allow them to raise compensation for their staff, and 4, providing affordable housing to early educators, which is another strategy to keep educators in the field, grow wealth among Black and Brown women, and strengthen communities. Our team has provided detailed recommendations, including cost, time frame, and measures of success to Chairman Murphy, and we'd be eager to engage in more conversation about this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual is from TMJ, I assume.
He's not.
Yeah. Next individual is Ian Bostila and Robert Agnew.
Ian, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi there, Ian Bautista from the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and I'm proud to kind of come on the heels of Daria, who just spoke as one of the component members of the Milwaukee Civic Response Team. I work for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation and have had the pleasure over the past 15 months of being the facilitator for that Milwaukee Civic Response Team effort. As requested to come into existence by Mayor Barrett and other members of the administration to respond at the civic leadership level to the real crisis that came with the pandemic and then following quickly in the wake of the pandemic, the recession. But let me just pause for a second and say, I agree 100% with Ms. Melody McCurtis and her call for participatory budgeting. I think it's a tremendous idea, and I think it's a concept that Milwaukee is ready for and needs to move in that direction post-haste. So let me just really quickly tell you, I won't get into detail about the 7 different teams, which include early childhood education, food, K-12 education, physical health, mental health, shelter and housing, and the economic recovery, which are led by about 300 members of the greater Milwaukee community from philanthropy, nonprofit organizations, the private sector, community residents, organizers, et cetera. But I just want to tell you about the overall priorities, the cross-cutting priorities that the 7 teams have come together to advocate for in regards to the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. Those are intergovernmental coordination. We want to encourage the city of Milwaukee, just as we've encouraged the state and the county and MPS to coordinate the investment of these generational, if not once in a lifetime, resources in order to really tackle some of the challenges that our fellow citizens have been talking to you about this evening. You've got to conquer the digital divide. Universal internet access should be a basic right, and it will pay great dividends in commerce, employment, healthcare, social services, and education. Mental health is also an important issue to think about, cross-cutting all of the sectors, early childhood care and education, like Daria just mentioned. And then I want to applaud the city for appointing Ms. Purvis in the role that she has with overseeing the city's investments in an equitable fashion, because racial equity is really that pivotal generational challenge that Milwaukee faces. And if we don't get investment right through the lens of racial equity, we will be no better off with the recovery this time around than we were back in 2008 and 2009, as Ms. Robinson was saying. And so we would urge you to really keep these cross-cutting priorities in consideration as you make decisions, and wherever and whenever possible, put the citizens of the city first and make sure that we're listening to their voices, because they've been the ones that have suffered and endured through this pandemic and the recession. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Next is Robert Agnew and then Robert Craig.
Robert Agnew is not here.
Mr. Agnew is not present. So Robert Craig and then Richard Diaz.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me, Alderman?
Yes.
This is Robert Craig. Thank you. I'm Executive Director of Citizen Action of Wisconsin. We're a statewide organization, but Milwaukee-based and centered. Our current headquarters in Walker's Point, but Alderman Murphy, we're looking at a building on Valete Street, so we may be moving to your district. Anyway, we are very involved in the Milwaukee City County Climate and Economic Equity Task Force, and that's been referenced already during this hearing. And it's going to be conveying to you some recommendations for use of the ARP money that would both start a major investment to prevent a climate catastrophe, which the city is already committed to achieving the international goals, but doing it in a way that dramatically improves economic equity, and especially racial economic equity. And there'll be a series of proposals. But I want to call attention to one of them. I think it'll be the first listed, and that is doing a large-scale weatherization program with renewable energy that is focused on the homes with the biggest energy burden. And energy burden is how much it costs you because of your housing, and of course low-income folks have older housing in Milwaukee, relative to your income. And a map will show you it parallels almost totally the racial composition of the city of Milwaukee, whereas the African American and Latinx predominant areas have the highest energy burden by far. And coming out of the pandemic, many have huge utility debt and are risking cutoffs and don't have access, because they don't necessarily have access to bank loans, to getting modern conservation, weatherization, solar panels, a thing middle class residents are able to take advantage of. And investment in this could also be a huge jobs program. If you connected to a transitional jobs program, you make sure local people who are denied access to good work could get those jobs. And the American Jobs Plan would likely provide, if it passes, even more resources to expand that. So I think by the indicators Ms. Purvis talked about, if you look at this together, this would have a huge impact on racial and economic disparities and on climate. And I think it would do very well in ACEP scoring if you looked at it. So I hope you'll look at that closely when it comes to you from the City County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity. So thank you very much, and thank you for holding this public hearing.
Thank you. Richard Diaz and then Tyree Allen.
Hello, members of the Finance and Personnel Committee. Thank you for allowing me the chance to speak. My name is Richard Diaz. I'm the chair of the Coalition on Lead Emergency, also known as COLE. The pandemic directly increased the risk of lead poisoning for families in Milwaukee. These same families were also more likely to suffer from severe impacts of COVID itself due to underlying health disparities and other social vulnerabilities suffered by low-income and underserved communities. Pre-COVID, the city of Milwaukee still had many struggles as it pertains to lead remediation work. We lack a labor force to do the job. The areas that are hit the hardest from lead exposure are the areas deemed food deserts, have some of the oldest housing stock, and while these areas are some of the poorest in the state, these areas also have some of the highest energy bills within the city. COLE requests $55 million from the ARPA funds to be able to boost some of this lead remediation work, to accelerate lead abatement by integrating weatherization, to fund needed lead abatement contractors, address deferrals that impede lead abatement work and weatherization work, increase community-led outreach workers, increase lead testing and education efforts, fund water filters while lead service lines are being replaced. Each one of these items that I listed all have a dollar figure attached to it that we can mail to all the members of the Common Council. I'd just like to end on the note that the ARPA funds present an opportunity to create health and environmental precedents, but also economic vitality and upward mobility to the most vulnerable populations of Milwaukeeans that have seen a gradual decline in neighborhood conditions since the closure of Milwaukee's biggest manufacturers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next individual is Richard Diaz. Excuse me, Tyree Allen and Derek Schotes.
Tyree is not here.
Okay, Mr. Allen's not present. Derek? Is Derek present?
Derek is not here.
Derek is not present. Next is Reverend Brady Coleman and Mitch Slater. Mr. Coleman.
Reverend Coleman is not
Reverend
here.
Coleman's not present. Mitch Slater and then Joe Fitzgerald.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty, good afternoon, Chairman Murphy, the Finance and Personnel Committee, and everyone else here. My name is Mitch Slater, and I am the Advocacy and Education Coordinator at Revitalize Milwaukee. We believe the ARPA funds should be directed towards critical home repairs for low-income homeowners in Milwaukee. It's often an overshadowed topic when it comes to housing because of typically more popular housing issues like providing shelter for the homeless, developing affordable housing, etc. Many of them are mentioned in Dennis's PowerPoint, and they are important. But this has caused a severe lack in resources for low-income homeowners that desperately need repairs done in their home to remain safe and healthy. Wisconsin is the worst state in the country when it comes to fatal falls among seniors, fatal falls being deaths that result from falls or fall-related injuries. Wisconsin's fatal fall rate is 3 times higher than the national average. In 2019 in Wisconsin, 1,672 adults over 65 years old died from fall-related injuries, and that is more than the total number of deaths from breast cancer and prostate cancer combined in Wisconsin that year. In Milwaukee, that number was 234, so that's 234 Milwaukeeans that died from very preventable deaths. The yearly cost of these falls is roughly $800 million, much of it being paid with public dollars. And with the rate of adults over 60 growing 6 times faster than the overall population, these numbers are at risk of increasing even further. With Revitalize Milwaukee's free home repairs for low-income homeowners in Milwaukee, we are working every day to reduce these numbers and keep local homeowners safe. Over the last 21 years, we've helped over 6,500 people stay safe in their home, and there are hundreds more that need our help every year. We're often their only option to stay safe in the home they've lived in for 20 to 30 plus years and want to continue living in. And that's why a portion of the ARPA funds should be allocated to home repairs, specifically to Revitalize Milwaukee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Joe Fitzgerald and Josila, and I apologize if I butcher your last name, Mendelea. Joe Fitzgerald?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. My name is Joe Fitzgerald. I'm a program manager with Milwaukee Water Commons. Live in Aldermanic District 3, but our office is located in District 15. And I'm here to urge you tonight to spend the American Rescue Plan funding to build communities that we deserve here in Milwaukee. I want to start off by just supporting this call for equity and participation and the call for participatory budgeting. I think it's important that we remember that American Rescue Plan funding is really the result of grassroots organizing, especially among communities of color and low-income communities. And so it's so important that this money that we see supports the needs of communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic and really marginalized from investments throughout Milwaukee's history. Following that train of thought, it's critical that this money follows the leadership of organizing in communities of color and low-income communities around Milwaukee. And along that line, it's also critical that none of this funding goes to supplement police budgets. I want to quickly endorse some of our partners who have commented here today. Milwaukee Water Commons supports the both verbal and written comments of Liberate MKE, the Coalition on Lead Emergency, and the City County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity. And then I want to focus the rest of my comments just to bring some insight from our own organization's work into some of the comments that were made today. Milwaukee Water Commons has worked with many partners in Milwaukee to focus on creating access to living wage employment for marginalized communities and improving public health by investing in water infrastructure and green infrastructure such as trees. But as we start to get, think about the hardships from this past year, reflecting on the lack of access to living wages and basic daily needs or public health disparities, and think about federal funding that might come for infrastructure. We're also thinking about, the disparities that exist within our workforce. some water sector employer or positions are actually occupied by 98% white men in the Milwaukee area and its surrounding counties. And I think it's important that we think about, as this money is coming to the city of Milwaukee, how are we investing to prepare to have the workforce that we need to actually see the impact of this funding on our city. I think it's also important to remember that workforce investments in wraparound services and healthy communities are also investments in supporting pathways to living wage employment, investing in transportation assistance, childcare, healthcare, affordable housing or eviction moratoriums, and a healthy environment also support communities' abilities to really access employment pathways in the city of Milwaukee and to benefit from investments that we're seeing being made in the city. So thank you for the time to comment today.
Next is Hosea Mendelea, and then Jordan Terry.
She's not here.
She's not present. Okay. Jordan Terry, and then Ann Betza. Jordan Terry.
Jordan, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm here.
Please go ahead.
So hi, my name is Jordan Terry. I am a resident of Milwaukee and the digital organizer for African American Roundtable. I'm here to urge you that ARPA funds be used to address community needs. Community needs such as creating a participatory budgeting process that will allow residents from each district to create a plan and vote on how they wish for these funds to be spent. It is an elected official's job to represent and empower their constituents. Participatory budgeting is the most responsible policy decision elected officials can make. I'm also here to demand that ARPA funds be used to provide accessible rent assistance, cancel rent and mortgage payments, and establish a long-term eviction moratorium. 1 out of every 5 Black women in Milwaukee has faced eviction in their adult lives. And in addition, 60% of Milwaukee renters are rent burdened. This means that renters pay anywhere from 40% to 70% of their income on rent. I'm also here to ask that ARPA funds should not be used to offset the city's pension crisis. The ARPA dashboard and meetings such as these do not do enough to include Milwaukee's residents. I join my community, the African American Roundtable, and the Liberate MKE Coalition in demanding that our community has real decision-making power with the money from ARPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ann. Is Ann present?
He's here.
Okay. And if you can unmute yourself, you're up. Ann Bitsa.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Unmuted? Okay. Let me just unplug these speakers. So my name is Ann Batiza, and I live in Milwaukee's 53204 zip code, and I'm here to speak as the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County's representative to the Coalition on Lead Emergency, known as COLE. You've already heard from my colleagues, Pam Ricker and Richard Diaz. I fully support COLE's request that the SDC and partner organizations receive about $55 million in funding from ARPA allocations to address lead abatement, workforce development, increased lead testing of children, and education about these issues for parents. This funding will continue to remove lead hazards from impoverished communities in Milwaukee and increase the testing of children for lead poisoning, issues that were exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. State Health Department data from 2013 to 2016 showed 20 to 30% of kids tested from the north side of Milwaukee were lead poisoned. Until those hazards are removed, generation after generation of children will continue to be lead poisoned there, with all the attendant negative impacts on their lives and municipal expenses incurred to address their disabilities. COVID exacerbated these impacts in impoverished lead-contaminated communities. First, according to Representative Gwen Moore, 27% fewer children were tested for lead poisoning in Milwaukee through September of 2020. Secondly, because of the COVID pandemic, Milwaukee's children spent considerably more time at home in lead-contaminated housing built before 1978, exposing them to dust created from deteriorating lead paint, lead-contaminated water coming into the home from lead laterals, or from playing in the surrounding soil contaminated with lead paint flecks dropped from poorly maintained siding. The ARPA funds present Milwaukee with an unusual opportunity to address this race-based lead scourge that has plagued Milwaukee's north side for generations. You can do this. You can begin to remove the lead hazards from our community by supporting Cole's request for $55 million to provide funding for the SDC and its partner organizations to boost their ability to abate homes in conjunction with weatherization, provide the workforce needed, and get more kids and pregnant women tested for lead poisoning. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Next, Janan Garci.
She's not here.
She's not present. Okay. Shigita McElroy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Shaquita McElroy, and I am a member of Cole, as well as Cole's Parent League. And I'm here today to just testify to the point that I am a concerned parent of a child that's actually lead poisoned. And he now is in 8th grade, graduating to 9th grade. And my son questions if he's good enough for high school, you know. And so my concerns are around the fact that the state isn't doing enough with combating this lead in our homes. And that's why Cole is requesting $55 billion from ARPA to be allocated to Social Development Commission, SDC, and the partner organizations that coordinate lead abatement work. And these funds will cover the accelerated lead abatement by integrating with weatherization, to funding needs of lead abatement contractors, addressing deferral that impede lead abatement and weatherization work, increasing community lead outreach workers, which is super important because a lot of parents don't know that their children are being lead poisoned in their home. And this is something that we really need to bring some attention to. Increase lead testing education efforts, fund water filters while lead service lines are being replaced. Like, this is beyond something that we should have been taking care of. And me being a mom of, and I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but me being a mom of a teenager who questions if he's good enough to be a part of our society, when does it stop? You know, how many more children have to question if they're good enough to be productive citizens in our society, because it's the issue that we are failing to address. So it's important. It's important to me for other children. It's important to me for my child. So I ask you guys to consider doing something about this and working together and coming together as the community, the good community and society that I know we are. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next is Deanna Branch and Janet Pritchard.
Deanna's here.
Deanna, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deanna Branch, and I have a son named Aiden Branch, who is suffering with the causes and effects of being lead poisoned. I am one of the many concerned mothers in Milwaukee who are facing this crisis, and I'm here today on our behalf. The Coalition on Lead Emergency requests a total of $55,553,000 of funding from ARPA allocations for the Social Development Commission and partner organizations that coordinate lead abatement work. This money will fund accelerate lead abatement by integrating with weatherization, fund needed lead abatement contractors, address deferrals that impede lead abatement and weatherization work, increase community lead outreach workers, increase lead testing and education efforts, fund water filters while lead service lines are being replaced. The Coalition on Lead Emergency strongly supports the use of ARPA funds to increase and accelerate lead abatement work. Milwaukee and Wisconsin have a very high burden of lead poisoning in comparison to other U.S. cities and states. That is why integrated weatherization and lead abatement work in these areas are essential to our cause of creating a lead-free environment for our children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Janet Pritchard and then Geneva Blanks.
Thank you. My name is Janet Pritchard, and I'm a member of Milwaukee's City County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity. Others have already summarized the general work of the task force, so I will not repeat that, but I would like to briefly describe task force recommendations to use ARPA funds to achieve the city's climate and equity goals. First, there's 5 recommendations that have been developed by the task force and will be shared with the whole Common Council soon. The first is to finance energy efficiency upgrades in high energy burden areas of Milwaukee. 2, to build affordable, modular, energy efficient homes with modular components made in the Century City Triangle Business Park, providing good paying manufacturing jobs. 3rd, to greatly expand investment to implement the city's green infrastructure plan by building Milwaukee's tree canopy to achieve the city's goals of 40% tree canopy, depaving excess parking lots and replace this with native landscaping, and building an equitable workforce to support Milwaukee's tree canopy and other green infrastructure investments. These investments should be prioritized for low-income communities. Expanded tree canopy and green space are demonstrated to provide significant physical and mental health benefits to the local communities. 4th, purchase of the 30th Street Corridor, Industrial Corridor Railroad to develop an off-street bike trail and commuter rail in the future to expand safe biking and climate-friendly commuting options for adjacent neighborhoods. And 5th, to invest in transportation infrastructure that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and improves mobility and health for low-income communities, which have been disproportionately impacted by COVID.
30 seconds.
I'd like to briefly elaborate on the first of these recommendations. Over 85,000 Milwaukeeans live in areas with average energy burdens in excess of 6% of household income. Many have accumulated debt on their energy bills during the pandemic. These unpaid bills are a huge burden and stress for low-income families struggling to recover from the pandemic. The task force proposes to use ARPA money for a revolving fund to pay for energy efficiency upgrades for high energy burden homes, resulting in substantial savings on energy bills. A portion of the savings would be used to repay the revolving fund, and a portion would be used to pay down the customer's energy debt. The on-bill financing fund would help renters as well as homeowners, and good paying jobs would also be created to provide energy efficiency upgrades such as attic insulation. These jobs would employ workers from low-income neighborhoods and include apprenticeship programs, transitional job funding, and other supports to ensure their success. These proposals are wholly in line with federal guidance calling for ARPA funds to be used to invest in housing and to address the long-standing social and economic inequities in our city. The reduced energy bills and resolved energy debt would provide long-term financial relief for low-income households, create good-paying green jobs, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to improve health outcomes and climate resilience for us all. I strongly urge you to consider all 5 of the City County Task Force on Climate Equity, Economic Equity recommendations for the use of ARPA funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next is Geneva Blanks and Hayden Harwood.
Both of them are not here.
Okay, those individuals are not present. Marcasa Tucker and then Bernadette Crenshaw.
Marcasa Tucker. Good evening. My name is Marcasa Tucker. I am a resident in the District 2 and Executive Director of the African American Roundtable. I urge you to spend ARPA resources to help build communities we deserve, where we can truly thrive, with the community truly leading the process. In order to achieve that, I, along with over 100 individuals and organizations, signed and sent a letter different from the one from Metcalf. So this is additional people to the Common Council and Mayor's office about a week ago, supporting the African American Roundtable and Liberate MKEs following demands to, yes, create a participatory budgeting trust that would allow residents from each aldermanic district the ability to decide how to best spend the ARPA resources. This would indeed ensure communities would have real decision-making power on what their neighborhoods need. Surveys won't accomplish this, so let's not waste another dollar on another survey. Provide housing assistance, which includes rent and mortgage cancellation or deferment, long-term eviction moratoriums to address the looming and devastating eviction and foreclosure crisis, and permanent quality accessible housing for all people, including unhoused people. We're not demanding, and we're also demanding not $1 be spent on MPD. In 2019, the community came together through the Liberate MKE campaign and asked for a divestment from police and an investment into the community. And we won $900,000 to support youth employment, affordable quality housing, and violence prevention. We introduced the idea of participatory budgeting then, and we're still demanding and fighting for this process. Last year, during the pandemic and massive uprisings surrounding police violence, the community spoke up again and said we want divestment from police and investment into our communities. And we want $2.9 million for housing program. But we know these past wins, they aren't nearly enough to truly turn our neighborhoods and communities around. The ARPA dollars presents us with an opportunity to do much more. We all know that our budget process is in a serious crisis because of the city has been fiscally irresponsible with our tax dollars and disbursement of budget resources. And as the day of reckoning, as Mayor Barrett called it, draws close, the city needs to come up with $76.6 million in 2023 to support pensions. The city can pause and do something different with the ARPA funds by listening to the community, acting on what we're saying, and positioning us to have real decision-making power through a participatory budgeting process. With the ARPA funds, we are perfectly positioned to take on this new process and also work to implement this same process into the budget process. I join the community, the Roundtable, and Liberate MKE Coalition, and many others in demanding that our community has real decision-making power with the money from ARPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernadette, and then Daryl Morin. Bernadette present?
She's here.
Yeah.
Bernadette, you have to unmute yourself. Bernadette, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Daryl?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl Modine, National President for Forward Latino Advocacy and Service Organization, and today I'm speaking here before you for our members who live throughout the great city of Milwaukee. I would like to first thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all the committee members and our other distinguished guests for this opportunity to speak before you this evening. As a majority-minority city, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact in our city and our communities of color. Many have suffered the loss of their loved ones, have suffered great financial hardship just due to the cost of their treatments, and others from the loss of employment. And for far too many of our residents of Milwaukee, all three. The American Rescue Plan represents a once-in-a-generation investment in our city. We must invest these $394,226,649 awarded to our city very judiciously and in ways that provide the greatest impact. That's why I've come before you this evening to share our membership's priorities. I'm here to ask you to make the much needed investments in replacing the lead pipes that currently provide drinking water to our families, creating physical and psychological impairments that sadly just cannot be undone. We ask that you make investments to eliminate the digital divide, as access to the internet is critical to not only succeeding in school, but for receiving job training, as well as for even applying for a job. We also ask that you take immediate action to provide grants to stabilize our local businesses, as without them, there's no economic future here in Milwaukee. And I can't stress this enough too. The number of calls we get and frustration we hear by taxpayers in Milwaukee who've experienced frustration in accessing city services. It's time that Milwaukee take the intentional step and allocate the small number of dollars that would be required to make sure that all customer-facing materials be made available in Spanish and Hmong. I also want to take this opportunity to challenge all of you with one more thing. For the last several years, we've all struggled to find funding for the social services which we know are critical to improving public health and public safety. There's been calls to shift funds from MPD to start these programs. This funding provides a rare opportunity to provide funding for these much needed and overdue social services so that police can focus on their mission and the mental health experts, the addiction experts, et cetera, can be dispatched to address those crises when they occur in our neighborhoods. We're asking you today to take this action, to take this one-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do what we need to bridge this transition for our community. Thank you all once again, and God bless.
Thank you. Camelia Ahmad and Alex Larson.
Both of them are not here.
Those individuals are not present. Celia Jackson and Azel Flores Guerra.
Celia is here. Celia, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
All right, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Good evening, members of the Finance and Personnel Committee. My name is Celia Jackson. I'm a community advocate for safe driving on our streets with the Coalition for Safe Driving, MKE. Our community is hurting. Actually, our community is unhealthy. We didn't need COVID-19 to tell us that. The increase in violence, the lack of safety on our roads and highways, the distrust that exists amongst different segments of the community, and most telling, the lack of hope that is present among some populations, especially our youth. The trauma that lives day in and day out is distressing and debilitating. So often we tackle the challenging issues of the day in the same way. We don't listen to the voices of people who are most impacted, at least not in a meaningful way. People have to march, fight, and exercise radical measures to be heard, creating a cyclical pattern and way of being unleashed as a way of unleashing their frustration and fatigue. I assert that we can begin to break this unhealthy cycle by creating a participatory budget process that allows the ARPA funds to be set aside for residents to make a plan for growth and development within their respective communities. The ability to speak to one's destiny in a way that empowers and allows one to give one voice can make a huge difference. I urge the council to use some of the ARPA money in a way that allows the residents to declare what is important to them and provide them with the resources to do something about it. It is probably the most strategic way for us to begin to heal from COVID and all the other levels of social toxicity that exist in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Azel Flores Guerra.
He is not here.
Not present. Reverend Craig Lewis and Alex Brower. Reverend Craig Lewis present. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm Minister Greg Lewis. I'm the assistant pastor at St. Gabriel's Church of God in Christ. I'm the president of Pastors United, and I'm the executive director of Souls to the Polls. Yeah, the city of Milwaukee is 40% African American and 19% Latinx. 1/3 of our families live in poverty, and Milwaukee continues to be a city where segregation, low wages, education gaps, and rates of imprisonment are the worst among the 50 largest states in the nation. This racial injustice is evident in our housing crisis too. I know 4 out of 10 of Black families spend over 1/3 of their income for rent, twice as many as white families. According to the eviction lab, most evictions are in majority Black neighborhoods. 7 out of 10 white families own their homes in Milwaukee. Less than 3 in 10 Black families own their homes. City records show that we have a shortage of 33,500 units of low-income housing, while 40% of our workers have low-wage jobs. For years, Milwaukee housing investments have focused on developing expensive condos and luxury apartments. Now, Milwaukee is receiving over $400 million in federal housing assistance, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reform the racial and economic imbalance in Milwaukee's housing patterns. Souls to the Polls is calling on the city to commit $100 million to create housing for low-income renters, which causing less than 30% of family earnings, to generate substantial home buying opportunities for low-wage workers so families can establish economic security, to invest in programs to prevent evictions, foreclosures, and policies that exploit our families. Milwaukee has a rare opportunity to address its well-documented housing crisis. It can squander it in small pieces, investing a little bit here and there. Such an approach will not result in the systematic change that Milwaukee needs and its people deserve, or it can make the decision to use it to make significant investment in addressing the shortage of housing. The city is plagued by mismatched in the demand for low-income housing and the supply. I call on the city to devote $100 million to stimulate the development in mixed-income housing. Use the money as leverage to attract private investment in our neighborhoods. Besides low housing, we have hardly any small businesses, and most of our small businesses didn't even get PPE money. That's a travesty. It's an incredible travesty. We need to have our folks' needs addressed, and we need to do it now. We have a great opportunity. We should do it right now. We may never have this opportunity again. Come on, Milwaukee, we can do better than this. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Next is Alex Brower and Shirley Tucker. Alex, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having this hearing tonight. Are people able to hear me? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Alex Brower. I am the treasurer of the Milwaukee Democratic Socialists of America, which advocates, for a better world through democracy and an end to the barbarism that we currently live under today. And I hope everyone in the Common Council will consider joining us in those efforts. But first and foremost, we can start working towards those ends by not squandering the money that we're going to be getting from the American Recovery Plan Act. And specifically, I want to back up a few things that some people have said already here tonight. First of all, to back up what the African American Roundtable has been saying and has said in a letter to you dated May 17th, that none of these funds from the Recovery Plan Act be spent until there is clear community-led process created, not just a survey. That means democratic budgeting that's participatory, right? Where individuals get to make proposals, not just through their representatives, but actual individuals, not just members of the council, but actual individuals get to make proposals about how money is spent, and then actual individuals, not just their representatives on the Common Council, get to decide and have a final decision that has real power over what happens to that money. The other thing that AART stated that the Milwaukee DSA completely supports is that the Milwaukee Police Department gets $0 in funding. Let me just say that again, that we support the Milwaukee Police Department getting $0 in funding with this money that's coming down from the federal government. And we also support providing housing assistance, which includes rent and mortgage cancellations or deferments. And we also support what Mark Pelzik was saying, which is supporting your city workers. Please join us in these efforts, and please do the right thing and don't let another opportunity be wasted. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Shirley Tucker.
And she is not here.
And she's not present. Okay, that concludes the individuals that have signed up to participate in this evening's meeting in regards to their ARPA funding. I want to thank all the participants for their thoughtful and concise ideas, and we do appreciate them very much. And I know that all members will be going back to their offices and thinking about many of the comments and how they plan either to take them into consideration and perhaps supports many of them. And I want to thank all my committee members for being present at this time also. I do want to afford an opportunity for anybody on the council if they wish to have any final statements. So any council member and committee. If not, I also want to afford an opportunity to, Alderwoman Zamarripa, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to announce if anybody would like to speak tomorrow or you want to pass the word along, we are still having another virtual opportunity around the ARPA dollars and how they should be spent here in the city of Milwaukee. It is a bilingual opportunity in English and Spanish. I'm hosting it along with the other Southside Alders as well as President Johnson. We've pushed it out on eNotify, and I'll also push it out on my Facebook at Alderwoman Jocasta. So hope to see you tomorrow virtually at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.
Okay. And is Dennis or Nikki or Sharon, would you have anything else you would like to add? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Alderman.
I do want to say thank you to all of the residents that gave their comments today and all of the residents that have emailed us or shared with us their thoughts thus far. I would hope that once the public survey is released that residents also participate in that as well, because it will help guide the decisions that we each have to make in the distribution of this money. While we all know that this is a generational amount of money, it's a heavy burden to figure out how to spend it best for this community. But it's decisions that we can only make knowing what the people that we represent want. So you sharing your thoughts and ideas is extremely helpful. And I also want people to know that many of the ideas discussed here today are being discussed in administration, are being discussed amongst members. We do hear you and are trying to figure out ways to do as much as we can to make sure that this money has the desired impact to help improve our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank our staff for helping put this on. I think this is, it's not what we like. We'd like to have more participation where individuals can come down, we can have face-to-face meetings, but hopefully as the pandemic improves, we will be at that point in the not too distant future. So I want to thank our staff for their hard work in putting this together. And I want to say specifically thank you to Laurel Meyer, who was our ASL sign language interpreter. We would thank her very much for her participation also. So at this time, Alderman Spiker moves that we hold item 3, file number 210135, communication relating to public comments and allocation and distribution of our ARPA funds, and having no other objections, so ordered.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.